I'm Leon. I'm the head of projects and delivery at Robert Walters, covering 3 different brands within our group, and happy to be here. There's always something that can be streamlined or a leaner way in which we can get to a positive outcome. The other areas that we've had to cover is, for instance, we were not necessarily high investors within technology, which has led to a lot of the technologies that we use across the brands coming to end of life, and us effectively sweating the asset out to the point of us needing to move very quickly in order to, one, catch up with the rest of the field and then ultimately get ahead of the curve. Yes, very much so. As you can imagine, all 3 brands have got different demands in terms of the way they expect delivery to happen for them. And at the same time, there is also a need for us to ensure that operational excellence, that means we can transition any deliveries as well. All in all, leads to a busy life for me, a lot of juggling. But at the same time, it's always been apparent that we need a tool that will bring all into place in one area, because there are many different things that we need to be covering. So for instance, we need to look at the resource management side of things. We need to look at the capability building that is needed within our teams. In addition to that, just the general collaboration to make sure that there isn't any disconnect between the 3 brands, and generally the way that you'd manage your projects going forwards, whether that be traditional or non-traditional. If we look back to the dark days of just managing out of Excel, we've done that and we've progressed accordingly through MS projects, going on to requiring something more of a project portfolio management tool. We've looked at individual task management tools as well as time management tools. And I suppose we've even evolved past that and then started looking into tools that you can use for change management, Kanban-esque style tools, which ultimately led to us having 8 or 9 different tools trying to do similar or the same type thing, but from different angles, which ultimately led us to be looking on the path for what would be out there in the market that could satisfy both, and ultimately to Sharktower. Yeah, so it's a mixture of all sorts, from the fact that we have undergone some transformation ourselves in terms of upgrading what we do. We're ultimately a Microsoft house, so collaboration started to become easier. For instance, using Microsoft Teams, but it still wasn't enough for what we're trying to deliver from a project management point of view. So we had been using a PPM tool, but the PPM tool traditionally has a lot of constraints per se, in that you have licensing constraints, the different abilities that you're able to have dependent upon permissions, and it can become quite an expensive ends to the means that you've got to try to get everybody to collaborate. So when I started looking for a tool, I was looking for something that could marry up the traditional way of working, as well as bringing in some of what is more non-traditional or agile per se. And I really wanted to drive through the idea of value-based outcomes, and therefore pushing the idea and making sure that others were able to see the objectives that we've got for a particular project and driving through those key results. And in doing that, that was something that I wasn't able to do with the previous tool that we had. So that was probably one of the main priorities that I had when looking for a new one. Yeah, so one of the thing about a lot of the traditional PPM tools are they're based on some of the traditional project management software that has been out there from yesteryear. So you don't get that much innovation in the UI that you're dealing with. That then makes it difficult, for instance, even when you bring on new staff, because you're training them to use something that is not necessarily the usability is not necessarily there. The differences that I found when looking and ultimately stumbling across Sharktower was that the UI was something that always made life easier. So there are some aspects of it that, they bring the idea of a plan on a page to life in comparison to just having a Gantt chart, say. Likewise, the ability to then flick into a Kanban rather than going into your traditional linear look of how a project plan is, also again brings to life the collaboration between the different teams that you have working within that, as well as for the actual project manager that is trying to control and coordinate what's going on within the project. And it was those things that ultimately ticked the boxes that led from just having a chat about Sharktower to, okay, it's a serious contender and how can we map this against what we currently do? The differences that it has made is hands down the collaboration. It's a cultural change because you're ultimately flattening out the project team. So we're a traditional company that did things in a traditional way, although wanted our delivery to be non-traditional and faster than the traditional way per se. What Sharktower has allowed us to do is to change that, to actually put the accountability into the hands of different people within the team and let them know that it's okay for that accountability to be theirs, that we'll ask the questions and so on, and then we'll go back to the drawing boards where we need to. That's been the biggest effect that it has had. In terms of the actual teams that use that, we have multiple teams, whether it be our development teams that use it, whether it be our infrastructure, whether it be external bodies. We're all able to come into the same space. There are a number of features that are very useful for us, as many will probably relate to. We're all very busy. We all seem to be in many more meetings than we should be in during the day. One thing that Sharktower has definitely been able to do is help us keep on task and on agenda for particular meetings. The features within your stand-ups and so on have helped no end. It helps the project manager to manage, and it also keeps all of the rest of the teams adhering to that. I've been on a number of calls where I've seen even team members jump in to say, no, keep an eye on time, we're on our way out. So it just keeps that cadence, it just keeps that frequency, and it keeps that bounce going through the meetings that we had. That although you look at it and you say, well, maybe 20 to 25% of our meetings are now taking place within Sharktower, those 20 to 25% of meetings are a lot more purposeful than the ones that were happening beforehand. So when you start looking at that and that throughput, and you start looking at the kind of reporting that we're able to get out from the teams that help us within Sharktower, you then start really adding some value, and you then balance that against the OKRs that we go through on a regular basis. And the benefit not only to my teams and the project teams that are working within that, but also the stakeholders outside of Sharktower that are actually consumers of that data, is quite priceless as it stands. That there is still an intimacy with the platform that is not necessarily available through others. In that if I do have an issue, or I see that there is a feature that may be useful to me, I can highlight that, and I know that it will actually get looked at. It's generally something that will come up in the discussion with my account manager. Likewise, I'm not restricted to only speaking with my account manager. So I suppose the collaboration that the tool brings is also what I see in the relationship that I have with Sharktower in general. I've never been in a situation where I think, no, I can't ask that question because it's going to be a short term no. It's often a not right now, but we'll get to it. And sometimes it's just that acknowledgement that you need to know and keep you steady and on pace for the changes that are afoot per se. It is a platform that is evolving, and whilst it's evolving, it's interesting to see the features that help us to move forwards in. So from my point of view, I've been very happy since we've come on board. I know others in the market that I've spoken to in the due diligence that I did beforehand. I know that they are happy too, and long may it continue.